keeping with the theme of resiliency, we want to make sure that we're addressing a multifaceted approach to cybersecurity, communications, and now we're going to get down to the basics of the individual. Now, I don't know what the circumstances were there yesterday in Georgia, but I think, Cap, it's probably only fair to say that some citizen probably acted in some capacity. One of the things that we learned from a dear friend of COPA and myself personally, Frank DeAngelis, who was on a similar stage with us many years ago, when he talked about the tragedy of Columbine, he talked about how some people, because of the lack of sophisticated response to an incident like that, some of the victims who may have survived simply bled out because people didn't understand concepts like stop the bleed. So I guess some of you will be very familiar with this. Others that are here today, I hope that this is going to be an eye-opening presentation talking about how we can better be prepared as individuals when somebody falls and cuts an artery, when a mass shooting occurs. Captain Nick Pajic from the Scottsdale Fire Department is our next presenter. Let's give him a warm welcome.
I've been told I have a booming voice, and so I normally don't use a mic, and people usually say, can you quiet down, please? So, my name is Nick Pajic. I am the EMS captain for Scottsdale Fire Department. I've been doing this for about 22 years now, and I started out back in rural Metro, if anyone recognizes that, back in the day where it was like 7,000 people competing for 12 spots in the fire department. So that was a job that I definitely wanted. Something that clicks off way back when is, well, why did I want to kind of get into this job besides the glory and the glam, a guy in uniform, it's like a cool thing to do. But I remember responding with a Phoenix truck as a ride along on the 51 freeway when there was a multi-vehicle accident. And there were some young individuals there going to prom. And there was someone that happened to almost lose their life. And I was brand new to this whole thing. And one of the firefighters said, hey, I need you to do me a favor. You see that? I said, yeah. He said, I want you to put your hand on it and don't let go. Okay. Never had any training. Put my hand there and I didn't even have a glove on. And there was blood. And I'm still standing here today and I get blood labs every 6 months and I'm fine. And nothing happened. Because our skin is literally the best barrier protector that you can have. So I want to remove that stigma. Yes, there is diseases. Yes, there is HIV. Yes, there's bad things in blood and vomit and all those nasty things. I agree. If you have open cuts and open things on your hands, yeah, absolutely. It's probably not something, but why do we do it? Why do first responders do what we do? Because we put our life on the line for you. So, in the grand scheme of things worldwide, do you know that each one of us in here has an opportunity to save somebody's life? Because the sad reality of it is this. In the grand scheme of the mass casualties, there's traffic, there's people, there's lots of things impeding PD, fire, EMS, news reporters, anyone to get to that scene immediately. Because it happens with you. It happens right next to you. And it doesn't have to happen just at an elementary school, a high school, a college. It doesn't just have to happen at a big event like what happened in Las Vegas, what happened in the Boston Marathon. These proven ways to save a life starts with you. Because when it takes us on average 4.5 minutes to get there, and that's once we actually get called, our bodies have about 5 liters of blood in it that pumps through our body in literally 1 minute, and a major artery or vessel can bleed out in around 2.5 to 3. So we're not there, guys. And that's where you come in. So I wanted to give like something memorable, and this only came up because I have 3 kids, and I did it in front of them, and they were like, "Daddy, that was cool." I'm like, "All right, I'll do it." So I said, "Okay, well, I want all 3 of you, I just want you to put your finger right here on your neck." And they're like, "Well, what are we doing?" I'm like, "You're listening, you're feeling your pulse." And they're like, "Oh, don't we have one down here?" Because, I'm a fireman, so I've told my kids everything up and beyond and explained crazy things to them. And they started feeling, and I'm like, "Okay, now what I want you to think about is that squirt gun that you guys use at the pool." And then I did the snaps. And then I said, "Okay, now think about something that's super scary." And the snaps started going faster. And so did the squirt gun. It started going faster. And then I said, "How much water just came out of that gun?" "A lot." "How much blood do you think that was?" "A lot." That's the best example that I can give you, because you get to see that right there. When we get there, there's already a pile of blood. When we get there, there's already soaked clothing items, towels. I did some research just on what had happened in Georgia, and they didn't really release a lot of data yet. But do you know at the Las Vegas one, there was reports of people taking socks off their feet and wadding them up and shoving them into wounds. Okay? That's how simple it is. It's literally a matter of stopping the bleed. Just like if you're watering something at your home and the hose bursts, what do? You kink the hose. We're asking that. The Stop the Bleed came out because of massive blood loss, because of the data that I had mentioned before. In Iraq and Afghanistan, soldiers were dying. Hands down, they were just dying, and there was no way to get them out of danger. So they had to come out with a way to do it. And the College of Surgeons and the DOD and Homeland Security and the tactical people said, "Hey, what is the best way that we can save a life quickly without medications, without advanced tourniquets or advanced uses? Like, what is the best way?" Because let's face it, if I rip my belt off and wrap it around your leg and tug, yeah, I'll probably be able to do something with that. But we need a standard, because everybody wants a standard. So it's all about educating the first responder, and that's a play on words, the first responder. I'm a first responder. These fine gentlemen right here are first responders, but you all can be first responders. There's over 4 million people currently in over 163 countries that are trained with Stop the Bleed. So Stop the Bleed is worldwide. And Stop the Bleed is taught to elementary kids, high schoolers, college people, and I'm sure a lot of you know some of this information. Stop the Bleed students have helped 62% of potential blood losses. Now, today I'm giving a presentation on Stop the Bleed, and this is just the down and dirty. So we're just going to get into it. But I wanted you to at least have some of the details, something simple that you could take home, something that you could potentially talk about when you're at the gym, when you're working out, when you're at home, when you're having dinner, when you're meeting with friends. I have to put this up there because this was part of the Stop the Bleed presentation. I don't have anything absolutely disgusting on this slide, so I hope that everybody's okay with it. American College of Surgeons state that the number one cause of preventable death after an injury occurs is bleeding. Now, the leading cause of death in the United States is trauma. Motor vehicle accidents, although they have gotten a lot safer with the vehicles and safety that we have. But the number one is bleeding. And you're thinking, like, where can I use this training? Because Captain Pajic, you had mentioned that there's these bombings, there's Iraq, but where does this happen for us? Well, I know from experience, I've gone to a culinary institute where a chef accidentally cut one of his arteries. or a chef accidentally bumped into a knife that went into his abdomen, or going to a playground where a kid fell off something and had an open fracture. Okay? There's a lot of areas between your home, business institutions, where you could be in a threatening environment. And those, let's face it, those threatening environments can happen everywhere. Yeah, you can have metal detectors, but people know how to get things through if they want. Fortunately and inherently, I hope that we have people that actually care in this world. So the goals of this training is, first, you identify, so you recognize what a life-threatening bleed is, and you stop that bleed. Stopping that bleed is couple simple things. Pressure, putting a hand on it. Let's say that my right arm is broken and my left arm is in a sling. Well, I got my knee. I could probably kneel on it. I could probably put my foot on it. I could do something to maybe do something. Your safety, I want you to all know here. I hope I didn't miss one. Stand by. This button is very sensitive. So anybody else in here that's presenting, be careful. Your safety is your first priority, okay? So if you're injured, you can't help anybody else. So that's why if you're in one of the bad environments that have happened, the shootings or a big tragedy, we want you to get to safety. We teach that ourselves. As a matter of fact, the fire department heavily relies on a relationship with the police department to secure a scene, to say it's code 4. But as I have been in many of these where a scene is code 4 and you walk up and why do they have their guns drawn? Oh, it wasn't as code 4 as I thought it was. So you help others when it's safe to do so, or if the situation does change or becomes unsafe, we want you to get away, pick up the phone, call 911. Well, maybe that person did it. Well, maybe that person did it. Maybe somebody else called. It's better to have multiple calls. Why? Because the information is critical. Where it happened, how many people are involved. We need that information. Personal safety, wear gloves if you can. If you get blood on you, try to get it off. We get blood on ours all the time. I mean, yeah, we have gloves on, but if it's a traumatic situation, we'll get blood on our pants, we get blood on our shirts, we get blood on our skin. What do? Soap and water. We go home and we wash it. It's no problem. If you are part of one of those events, or you are assisting someone and you do get blood on you and you're afraid, and that's okay. I'd be afraid too. We get needle sticks in our organization. We come into contact with crazy stuff. But again, so far, 22 years in, and I'm okay. So alert 911, figure out where that bleeding is coming from, and then put some sort of compress, control it. So knowing that location for the fire, giving them what happened, how many people are injured, are you safe? They are going to prompt you for these questions. They speak very slowly and calculated. Well, we want to really speed it up, but they will get you to a point and get you to a comfortable area where you know what's going on. Bleeding, that's one of the graphic images. And that one you could actually do something about. Find the source. So with social media, it has really changed the landscape for fire and police and how we treat people. Because if I've got my leg lopped off and it's right on Scottsdale Road, I know that I'm going to have about 75 rubberneckers that are going to be out like this, taking pictures and video. And the last thing we want to do as professionals is take off all your clothes right there in the middle of the street just to add to it. Whereas we're just trying to identify a life threat. We're trying to help that person. So oftentimes when we arrive on scene, especially if I'm wearing dark pants, you're not going to see me bleeding. So you got to identify the bleed. A funny story, we have 12 new people in our organization that all want to become paramedics, and I ran their skills stations for them. And I had a mannequin on the ground that looked normal, and I had a jacket over the right leg. And they all came in and they are nervous because it's a new process and their airway, breathing, circulation, and they're going through their head all these things. And I said, okay, well, what about your assessment? They start their assessment and they're like, circulation. Do I see any bleeding? And I'm like looking at the jacket. And I look at them and they're like, oh, can I take that off? Yes, you can take that off. And they take it off and there's a big open fracture on this mannequin. And there's a puddle of blood mimicked by a red tablecloth, but that's merely interesting for everybody in here. And that's the point though, is in order to help and assess and save somebody's life, you have to identify that. You got to find the bleeding. You got to figure out, is it continuous? Is it actively spilling out? Because remember that, what I told you, the pulse, they're freaked out, you're freaked out, that blood is moving fast. 2 minutes goes by real quick, real quick. We may think it's 20 minutes and it could have been just the 2. Large volume bleeding, are they laying in a pool of blood? That's another thing. Or is there a big pool of blood starting to seep out from somewhere? Looking for the multiple places. Significant blood loss. So I kind of wanted to get these couple of slides in here just to give us a point of reference where bleeding occurs. Extremity bleeds, arms, legs, neck. By the way, don't put a tourniquet around your neck. It really hurts. I've tried it with my kids to make them stop talking, but it doesn't work either. Your arms and your legs, those are going to be your main things where you can actually do something with the tourniquet. There's these really cool kits on Stop the Bleed where they give you packing materials. There are combat gauze or quick clot. There's agents in there that actually will help to stop the bleed. But if you look at this, 750 to 1500 cc's of blood is a significant blood loss. That's a minute and a half on a major extremity injury. Apply direct pressure to the wound. So we teach in our organization, the first thing you do is put pressure. I started thinking about that. And in this arena or this realm of discussing this, how can I put pressure on a wound? Everyone in here has cut their finger. Everyone in here may or may have not smashed their finger with a hammer. And I don't know about you guys, but either you're going to put it in your mouth for some odd reason because you don't want blood everywhere, or you're going to hold it up in the air and you're going to scream and run, which is another one I've seen, or you're just going to walk over to the sink and you're going to hold pressure. And what happens? It stops. Now, there's a lot of cool medicines out there that make us not clot anymore. So that could be a little bit more difficult. I understand that. But in generalities, we learned this from the time we were little, to put pressure on something, to make it stop. You want to use just enough gauze or cloth to cover the injury. So that's a good one. How much gauze or cloth is necessary, Nick? Well, I don't know because I'm not there. If somebody got stabbed with a knife, we watch the movies and they're spurting blood all over this room, and I've never seen a knife wound in somebody's belly that spurted around everywhere. I'm just going to tell you that right now. It doesn't happen. If the pressure stops the bleeding, you stay there, okay? You don't move. You move, they die. You are their best chance at life. For larger wounds, that superficial pressure may not be enough. So I brought up where someone used a sock. If you don't have a kit like this, you have a sweatshirt, We love wearing sweatshirts here when it's like 85 degrees. Ooh, it's fall. Let's put a sweatshirt and a beanie on. I'm sweating though, but it's cool. So we have stuff with us, okay? We have sweaters. We have things in our cars. You know, everybody that, I don't know about you guys, but I go to the car wash all the time, so I probably have about 6 of those blue towels in there. So I always have something going on, right? If the bleeding is from a deep wound, what you do want to do though, is you want to get the absorbent in there. So you're going to ask me now, okay, well, this is not clean. I'm going to put it inside there. Don't worry. There's antibiotics. They're going to clean it anyways. We're talking about saving lives. So taking if you were to go and purchase one of these kits, this is just normal gauze. It just has a really cool agent on there to make things bleed. And the reason I say is you have to put it inside is when this agent makes contact, it actually clots it off. But if you don't have that and you're stuffing a sock in there or a shirt or a sweater, get it inside as best you can, hold pressure, and stop. Stay there. You can say to the person who's on the ground, maybe, hey, hold pressure on that. They're not thinking about holding pressure on it. This is not a movie. This is life and death. You're their best chance. When you don't have an option of packing materials, so in the large portion of your body, that's where we would do a lot of packing, and we were focusing on the extremities. Oops, fast. Tourniquets. So I mentioned those cool old movies. I remember the country westerns, and you know, somebody would fall off something and they're like, hey, bite on this. I'm gonna hold this belt until you stop bleeding. These tourniquets, these are all practice training tourniquets, okay? There's a lot of them out there, okay? The main thing about these tourniquets that you want to truly know about is that the ones at the American College of Surgeons, they actually recommend certain ones. I looked online today. They come like this. And on the front, it actually says ACS, American College of Surgeons. So there are ones out there that are important. So I invite you guys right now to pick up one, somebody at the table. These fine gentlemen from the fire department. These fine gentlemen from the fire department will show you how to do it. If it's not already connected, you're going to take the end and loop it in like a belt. Slide it up on their arm, preferably. And you're going to just tighten it down like this. And right here, you don't want to necessarily, right here, you don't need to, like, this is not where we're cranking it down, so you know. This is just so that we can get it on there, okay? Get it to attach to part of the Velcro. And there's a stick on there. And I just want you to spin it a couple of times until the bleeding would stop in real life, but this is just enough. The people that have it on, does it hurt? Does it hurt? Yeah? I'll turn more. When you get to a point where that blood stops, you're going to drop it in that little hard plastic area. So turn it until you can get to that little C that's sticking up. And that pen will stop in there. There's a little white thing. I want you to cover it. You can take that off. So I had said something in particular. Does it hurt? The reason I asked, does it hurt? That's a really awesome thing for us. We want it to hurt because it's working, number one, and number two, you're awake and you're talking to us. And it's a really uncomfortable feeling for us in the field that are professionals. and probably a really uncomfortable feeling for everyone out here when somebody stops talking to you. By the way, if you haven't taken them off yet, you can take them off. Or else Honor Health's going to get a lot of calls, and probably my boss. What I do want you guys to remember is just don't remove the tourniquet. So similar to stopping the bleed, you apply the tourniquet. Once the bleeding stops, you're golden. You wait for EMS to arrive, support that person in any other way you can. We talked about those. This is the recommended style. So the ones that you guys are all practicing with, those are practice ones as to not impose or incur harm. But they definitely do feel and operate the same way as the real ones. Question that I always get is, well, what about kids? So like the elementary schools, right? 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 14-year-olds. So they can be used on kids. I have an 11-year-old. And I put it on him and it works just the same. You want to cinch it down. But most of the time with kids, because they are smaller, just applying pressure, that will be the one that will probably help them the best. And being near them and talking to them and getting down on their level and reassuring them that it's going to be okay. You don't have to lie. It's going to be okay. I'm here with you. I'm not leaving. That's what they want to hear. I think that's what anyone in here wants us to hear. Your personal safety, call 911. Find where that bleed is, pressure. If you happen to have a kit that you can purchase online from Stop the Bleed has it and get the approved, apply your tourniquet. Wait for help to arrive. This was a little Cape Cod podcast I listened to. It was kind of cool. Just listening to the docs talk through. I know that Stop the Bleed has a podcast. There's a lot of different people on there that have spoken. And well, it was kind of fun at the very end of their podcast. They're always like, well, if you can have somebody else learn Stop the Bleed, who would it be? People threw out like Selma Hayek. That guy just wanted to meet Selma Hayek. That was the only reason why he said that. Somebody said LeBron James, role models, people that others would listen to. Share this information. I encourage you to go on the website, go on the podcast. You can reach out to your hospital. I know that we're in Scottsdale, but you can reach out to your fire departments. We love helping. That's why we do this. We want to help you. We want to provide you with resources. Connect the dots is what I like to call it. If you have any questions?
You know, you and I were talking before I met you in person, and I'll date myself. I became a paramedic back in 1980, and we got training about using tourniquets. And the lead instructor was an attorney who told us how liable we would be if we misuse a tourniquet. The only time that as paramedics in 1980 that we were allowed to use a tourniquet was to do rotating tourniquets to reduce venous blood flow when somebody was suffering from CHF. But life over limb, isn't that the central message that I'm really hearing from you today?
And that's what it really comes down to. So just like you see defibrillators everywhere, CPR and defibrillators are the life support systems in place to provide quick first responder. It's the same thing with the Stop the Bleed. I did some research like on Good Samaritan laws before I came in and discussed it with a few attorney friends of mine. And as long as you're providing a skill that you have learned and you truly are trying to do something justly for this person, you will definitely fall within a legal right. Now, as I'm with Scottsdale Fire, so we don't like to, I'll say no further comment on that. I learned from my predecessors, but I do know that there is that Good Samaritan piece of that where you are trying to save a life, and that's what it really comes down to.
Let's give him a big hand. Thanks, Scott.